Welcome everyone, the Monthly Dev April event, and we are ready to rock. We have here three amazing guests, and the topic today is open source. And this will be very interesting, I think, because we will talk about different things. Let me share the screen. By the way, hi to all the guests. We can just say hi if you want. So this is also good for sound check. Let me share the screen. There we go. So today we'll talk about open source, and we have three guests. We'll start with Tracy. Tracy asked to go first, and we'll talk about how to get involved in open source. Then we'll have Brian Douglas. I've been invited in his Twitter space, but now this will be first live stream together. It's also called Open Source Hospitality. This title is a bit strange. I want to ask him about this before we start. Let's see. And last but not least, Javier Perez. I've digged a bit into his past, so I'll say something about his past before we start. And the title of the event is What's Happening in Open Source. I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but we will see. So yes, just before we start, let me remember you that this kind of events, which is a monthly event, unsurprisingly because it's called the Monthly Dev, it's offered by you by daily.dev, which is a tool to stay updated as developers. It's a tool from developers to developers. So I highly recommend you to check it out. It's free. There is no premium version. You can just check it and see how this can really help you to stay updated. So that's it. Okay, so I think we can start. And so let me remove all the speakers by Javier. So Tracy, how are you? I think we are about to start. And
Doing great.
yeah. I know. I just want to say a couple of things I know about Tracy. Tracy is the CEO of this company. We also collaborate also with the Monthly Dev event organization. You are a keynote speaker. You are in the RxJS core team. I'm a huge fan of RxJS.
I'm glad to hear that.
She's also a Google Dev expert. She's also a GitHub star. We have many GitHub people today. Microsoft MVP, which doesn't stand for a minimal valuable product, but for mostly valuable something. I don't know.
Minimum viable product would actually be better. That'd be more interesting.
She's also an investor, a startup advisor. So Tracy, how are you? A couple of minutes, and then I'll let you start with your talk.
Yeah, thank you. No, things are wonderful, doing great. It's raining here in Atlanta. And I'm excited to give this little talk today. So hopefully it'll teach you all a little bit about getting involved in open source and inspire people. And I love seeing all these amazing people on YouTube.
Yeah.
Hi, John from Kenya.
It's the comments are too many. I'm trying to show them all, but it's we have close to 100 people. So hi everyone. I think this would be very interesting because open source developers, I don't know, name a better combo, because it's really, I think, what really can make really leverage your career as a developer. And I don't know. So we have many things to start to talk about. Of course, if you can like a video, share the video. It will be awesome. Of course. Okay, Tracy, so let me share your screen. Can I share your screen? Perfect. Okay, so Tracy.
All right.
I think we can start 20 minutes,
Great.
then 5 minutes for the questions. If you have a question, just drop this in the chat. I'll be there. And
Thank you.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, usually I try to answer all the questions like while I'm talking. So I don't know if you guys have questions, great. But usually there's not that many questions after I give this talk. Love seeing folks. Hi, Tomer from Israel. I don't know if I said that right. Love seeing Anoop from India. Hello. Love to see figure out where all of y'all are. So feel free to drop it in the comments. So today we're going to give a little chat about open source and just how to contribute to open source. Ooh, South Africa, fun. Cyprus, that's exciting. All the places I want to visit. So first off, there's so many different ways to contribute to open source. It's actually really easy. And again, I get this question a lot, like how do I actually contribute to open source? So this is a quick quick start guide. Oh, love seeing folks from Iran, Indonesia, Romania, Oakland. Love it. All right. So as we just mentioned, my name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet. Feel free to come and hang out and join the community there. Always happy to give a chat. I love working at this.labs where I'm the CEO. We're a 50-person consultancy. And, I just love everything open source. So anything I can get my hands on and get involved in, I always get excited about. Back to my day job, we get to work with some really, really cool clients. I really love the work that we do. It is so much fun. And, we're also hiring. And I always say that this is how I make friends. So if you are looking for a new job, we're actually 100% remote and worldwide, which is pretty cool. So if you're looking for a new position or just curious, feel free to email me anytime and just say hi. All right. So today we're going to talk about a few things. I'm going to share a few stories about other people that you might know and their journeys into open source. Then we're going to talk about, why you want to get into open source. A lot of people say they do, but, the question is like, really, well, why do you want to? And then how, based on your why, how do you actually do that? And then we'll just talk about some really easy do's and don'ts of what to consider as you go through your journey. Ooh, Antarctica. That's exciting. Welcome. Brazil too. Fun. I need to make a list of everyone that's here and then rank all the places I want to go. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started off in journeys. So how many of y'all know Sarah Drasner? She's amazing, right? Sarah is really awesome. And, I asked her, how did you get involved in open source? And she said, hey, I first started making 100 private repos and they all sucked. And I was scared to make them public. I'm sure they did not suck. And then she made a ton of code bends and that didn't seem as scary. And then she, tried to ask jQuery to add support for SVG. They said no, and then maybe, and that was exciting to her. And then she just said, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to go ahead and make my own project to help developers work faster. And she did that a million times, and then she was successful. So, keep doing what you're doing because whatever part of the journey you're in, oh my gosh, you could be the next Sarah Drasner. Kent C. Dodds as well, obviously another amazing person that we all know and love. He said he didn't start in the world of open source as a maintainer of projects. He had a first pull request, and it was to a Java framework where he fixed a typo to add an extra line to the file. How easy is that, right? I'm sure you all see that very often. You see one typo and you think, maybe I can contribute to this. Well, you should definitely do it. So that's where Kent got started. And then he spent hours and hours and hours writing JavaScript and doing side projects. And then he became the Kent Dodds that he is today. So again, it starts with a simple pull request. I want to talk a little bit about my journey as well. So, a few years ago, I joined a boot camp and I said, okay, I really love this JavaScript thing. Let me go meet the JavaScript community. Let me start getting involved in open source. And the first thing I did was just find people on Twitter. I found people on Twitter. I was like, oh man, who's talking about Angular? Who's talking about React? Who's talking about Ember? And then I started seeing who was speaking at conferences, what conferences were happening. I got to know the community. And then I started sharing and educating my experience. I was still a beginner at the time, but as I was learning things, I was blogging about everything I learned. And, surprisingly, I was surprised at the time that what I was blogging about was actually useful to other people. Because honestly, I was just blogging because it was useful to me, right? It helped me remember and understand what I was learning by, sharing it in a blog form. So that was amazing. And because I was sharing and helping educate, it helped me become a valued member of the community. I also started meeting maintainers. I just got to know people. So all of you who are here and chatting, for example, Adya from India, for example, this is a great way to just meet people, right? You're meeting people who have been in open source. We're getting to know you. Hello from France, for example. And that's what I did. I met open source maintainers online, at meetups, at conferences. And if you're just nice and friendly and helpful, then, the rest will just come, right? Then lastly, of course, I wanted to contribute more to the community. And I was really good friends with the RxJS core team, and they really needed help with the documentation. It was not a good time because I think there was only ArcsJS4 documentation at the time. So I saw where they needed help and where they were struggling. And I decided to form a community team to help take on this project. I told everyone at the different conferences I was going to that I was starting an ArcsJS docs team. And, literally I spun up an empty repo like, here we go. Here's the ArcsJS docs. And the entire community started to just pitch in. And then all of a sudden, we have the ArcsJS docs that we know and love today. So, you really don't have to do a lot to, again, get involved and get started. Just keep focusing on what you're good at. Don't try to be something you're not, and start contributing. And, you'll hopefully be rewarded through knowing that you made a difference in the open source world. So hopefully those stories inspired you, right? Ken to Sarah are very inspiring. Hopefully my path inspired you as well, showing you that it's actually not that difficult to start your career in open source. But now we want to talk about the why. Why do you want to contribute to open source? You can have different goals. Some might be functional, some might be aspirational. If you are doing something for more functional reasons, it might be because you need to fix something that's not working for you, right? Maybe, material UI, you're using it, and for some reason the component is broken and you really need something to be fixed. Okay, maybe you need to go contribute. Or maybe one of the components isn't accessible enough and it needs to be more accessible. Okay, maybe you need to go fix it because it's not working for you, right? Maybe some documentation is out of date for maybe Create React App, for example, and you figured it out and you thought, oh, this would be so useful for somebody else to know. Okay, maybe you do it for that reason, right? So typically it's something related to work. Another path of open source is aspirational, and that is just building a career in open source, right? You can get new jobs, increase your knowledge within the technology, do a lot of really, really amazing things by getting involved. And both paths are totally awesome, but how you approach them is a little bit different. So functional. Let's talk about functional first. So if you are doing something for your job, and you know that you are going to need the help of somebody in the future, the best thing to do is first give before you ask. Your life is going to be so much easier if you're already contributing to a community or giving back, because the maintainers are going to know you, and that's going to be a lot easier for you to have a conversation later on if something is not working. For example, Redux is a great example. Mark Erickson is an amazing maintainer, and he's always looking for contributors to Redux and the different libraries underneath it. So if you're looking to do that, Redux library is actually really easy to contribute to. But then maybe you might say, okay, well, why isn't Redux in TypeScript? Can I help merge that PR that's been there for a while and get the help? Those are the things, again, that, you can drive from a functional perspective if you need it for work, if you just, get involved in the community and realize what's going on, right? I think another really important thing is, as you are looking at these repos, make sure you are submitting an issue and asking for feedback first. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in open source behind closed doors. For example, like in ArcsJS, you might really want an operator, and you're thinking, why on earth is they're not this operator? But maybe the core team has already talked about it and decided against making the change. So you, again, don't want to spend tons of work trying to do something before you ask for feedback first. The other thing is finding maintainers in other forums. Everyone is so busy, and it is very difficult to keep up with GitHub notifications. So maybe Brian from GitHub can find a solution for that in the future. But yes, so I would say with this, if somebody submits an issue or a PR in any of the repos that I'm watching, I'm typically not paying attention. But if someone sends me a tweet and says, hey, I submitted this PR, can you take a look at it on Twitter or on email, I will probably respond to them, right? So be nice, send a personal message, get to know people, whatever. And, ask them in other forms, because that's really where like a lot of the other magic happens. I would also say build genuine relationships, right? I said get to know people, but make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, not to just self-serve yourself. People really care about genuine relationships, and people can feel if you're genuine or not. And, you know, the whole idea of open source is doing good for the community, right? So there's, you know, great ways to do that. Yes, and Brian said use Discord. Discord is also a great way to get involved in the community and ping people, for example. Somebody asked, where can I find open source issues? You can go to any repo and look at all the different issues. There's so many ones out there. I also, on this.media's YouTube, there's a new series that I just recorded. It's called How to Contribute. And it's how to contribute to Angular, how to contribute to Blitz.js, how to contribute to Redwood.js, how to contribute to RxJS, for example. And I go through the different repos with like all the different maintainers, and we talk about how to contribute to their project. But through that series, you'll see how different each team is and how things are set up. So that brings me to aspirational. So aspirational, this is, you know, if you just want to build a career in open source. And the thing I love about this is that you're actually not tied down to something you're using at work, right? Are you using React at work? Are you using Angular at work, Vue, whatever? You don't have to contribute to that library. You can do whatever you want to do. So this is, again, kind of like the most amazing thing, because it is, like I just said, like looking at different issues and saying, hey, can I be a successful contributor to this project? Do I like this team? You can go look at how they're talking to people in the issues, how they're doing code reviews, like what actually they need help with, and is it actually something I can help with, you know? And you can do whatever you want to do. Again, that's what I love about it. But, you know, again, going back to number 2, making sure you're solving problems that maintainers actually want. That is very important. So still submit a PR, ask, you know, hey, can I help with this, right? You don't want to, again, spend time where, you know, where it's not needed, right? The third thing is just helping with the documentation. I think like one of the most easiest things, and I swear I say this every single talk, and every single amazing open source maintainer you might know and love says this as well. And I feel like people don't take it seriously, but helping with the documentation. So many amazing maintainers that you know out there, know and love, started with the documentation and helping with the docs. So as you are, you know, using a library, you know, feel free to submit a PR and say, hey, you know what, there is this little typo here. Can we help? Can I help with it? I think the other thing from an aspirational perspective is educating and sharing, right? This isn't so important from a functional perspective, but you're learning so much as you're, you know, building and developing things. So educate and share about your experience. There are so many open source people out there who actually don't make, you know, significant code contributions. Sometimes we look at open source as just code contributions, but that's actually not true. The education and the sharing aspect of things is so valuable and so useful. So, you know, Deborah Carrata, John Papa, for example, I mean, they've built really cool things, but they're mostly well known for like how amazing they are as teachers, right? So blog about things, write courses, you know, do all those different types of things, because all of that stuff is really, really, really valuable for building your career in open source. Brandon Bayer, he is with Blitz.js, and, you know, he's so funny because, you know, he made some small little changes to some open source projects, and then, you know, he got excited about it, and then he just said, okay, I'm going to start Blitz.js. So definitely check out Blitz.js. It's a full stack React framework, pretty amazing. But, you know, again, like just get started and then you're like off and going. And he's been quite successful in what he's been doing. So I'm really excited about that. A few do's and don'ts before I go. I would say definitely, first off, have compassion. Remember that maintainers are usually working for free on nights and weekends, and it's difficult. It's difficult to keep everyone happy. Also, make sure to treat maintainers like people, right? They can only handle so many things at a time. Like, My friend Ben, who wrote RxJS, he is like definitely single threaded, only one track. He can only handle one thing at a time. So, that's how a lot of people are, right? And if you treat them badly because they're not responding to you, they probably aren't going to care to help you in the future. Also, be professional, right? Like, you might not be working with these people in open source projects for a real job and what you're getting paid for, but you need to make sure to have like respect and treat people professionally, because nobody likes dealing with people who don't respect each other. Making sure you're also assuming the best of intentions. We were just talking about like the Twitter source code and how people, once it's open source, people are going to rip it apart. Here's the thing, right? You weren't there when it was written, and you don't know what trade-offs they needed to make when it was written. So don't go in there guns blazing, acting like someone did something wrong or whatever, or insulting the code, because it's a tireless and often thankless job. And typically when you're looking at code, I'm sure you can go back a few months and look at your own code and be like, ew, what was I thinking over here? Making sure you're also abiding by the code of conduct. Treat people as you would want to be treated. And if there's not a code of conduct for a project, just make sure you're following like a good general code of conduct. Definitely don't act or be entitled. Don't think you're a maintainer's biggest priority. Like, open source, a full-time job, kids, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, family, working out. Like, open source maintainers have to juggle a million things, right? Also, make sure to follow up, but don't be annoying. Like, don't email about an issue 10 times a day, but follow up within reason. Like, sometimes, again, people just like are busy with their screen and they just forget. Doesn't mean they forgot about you. They just need a little reminder. So do that. Also, don't complain. If you're getting something for free, it's probably not the nicest way to approach somebody, right? And a lot of times people will say, hey, if you don't like it, go use a different library. So again, hopefully that helped inspire you with a little bit of those stories. Hopefully you kind of understand now a little bit more about why you might want to get involved in open source and how as well, and a few of the do's and don'ts. And then definitely please contribute to the docs, help with the docs. Docs are underrated. And, if you want to come hang out with me, feel free to email me, Tracy at this dot. And again, I'm always happy to help however I can. Or, again, if you're looking for a new job, we're 100% remote and worldwide. So thank you so much for having me.
Nice, Tracy. You look super professional in this picture. I like that.
Yes, it's my duck outfit.
Nice, perfect. I like this. I personally, I really love the don't do this. I think if you replace maintainer with people, basically it's like don't what you should don't do in your life, not just about open source.
That's very
yes,
true.
Okay. So, by the way, thank you so much. And if you have any question, just drop this in the chat. And I think there is already a question about the links of what you were talking about, like how to contribute. Is that on the this.youtube channel?
It is on this YouTube channel, and I'll try to post some links in there. If I can't post them, I will send them. You did? Okay, great.
I found it already. Yeah. I was not sure if that was that one, but it could be this one.
Yeah.
This.media. You are close to 10,000 subscribers, so good luck.
And
thank you. Yes, so let me see. Okay, so of course we want this kind of talks interactive. So feel free to share it, to share something. Let's see. Just subscribe to this media channel. Amazing. Thanks for sharing your view. A lot of compliments. To be honest. I like that. I like that you mentioned other people. Of course, I know all of them. Sarah, Kent. I think Kent has been on this channel, or maybe we need to invite him again. And yes, so yes. Let me check.
I see, Rowan, for example, has a question. He says, how can I know if the issue I'm working on isn't being worked on by another person so I don't waste my time? I would say just commenting on it and saying, hey, is this being worked on? Or, a lot of projects actually have a how to contribute markdown file, which they'll answer those questions. Or you can also just ping a maintainer on Twitter, for example, and ask them hey, do you think I could work on this? So, or, sometimes it's assigned to somebody. So it really depends on the actual project that you're working on and how they manage the project.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think that if you contribute to open source, you are always writing code. So in my opinion, it's never a total waste of time. And also from a maintainer perspective, they can also, maybe take the best of the two PRs, for example. So I don't think that if you do a good work, it will be wasted in any ways. But yes, I get what you say, Rawan. Nice.
I like this other one. This Holden says, are there any recommended platforms for finding open source projects?
Yes.
I don't know if they're say for finding projects. Let's see. I don't know. Brian didn't answer that. So there is this project that we actually just open source. It's called framework.dev. And it's right now for React, but we're creating the similar ones for Angular and Vue. And it shows you like a bunch of different projects within a specific category. So you can look at you can find all the state management, React libraries. And, that might be an easy way to kind of go through and figure out okay, what are the relevant libraries within this? You can also see the number of GitHub stars this specific library has, or the number of NPM downloads for the package. So that would be a really easy way to find projects. Framework.dev is the URL for that.
Nice. And of course, feel free also to join multiple communities. I think this is never a problem, but it's more about the mindset. And I think that with your words, you really helped out. Because, for example, can I say something that makes me a little bit sad that I made a poll, have you ever contributed to open source? And we have 70% of the people who said no. And I think it's not that hard to contribute. Maybe start with a typo, with the things, but it's more about the mindset and not about the type of contribution. So I would like to make, this poll in 1 year and maybe have different results. So thank you, because I think we need to advocate this more, I think.
Yeah, and Brian was also mentioning that he has open sourced as well, which is another great resource for that.
Nice. But I think that now it's his turn, so
yes.
I think we will have enough time. So this is also the perfect hook to switch speaker. Thank you so much, Tracy, for your work, also for helping us with the monthly dev events. So yes, thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Let me remove. Okay. Let me invite now Brian. Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It was a great talk, and I'm a big fan of daily.dev as well, and happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So we've made the Twitter space together. You were the host. I was the guest. Now I can't interview really you. Just a couple of minutes, so it will be something super fast. But of course, he works at GitHub, and also is I think you have done a lot of Twitter Spaces. You have a series, a whole series. So maybe I don't know if this is the perfect place, but you do a lot of stuff. You are very active on social media. And yes. Brian, would you like to introduce yourself for just a couple of minutes?
Yeah.
And then I let you talk. As
you mentioned,
so it's cool.
You're right on the money. I'm on everywhere. I'm BWO on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram as well. I'm starting to pick that up again as well. And my day job is director of developer advocacy at GitHub. So my job is to talk to open source maintainers and engage them, show them how to use some features. But we also do a lot of events like this and show folks how to use things like GitHub Actions and packages and update your profile README. So everything on point or on topic for this event. Me and my team, we sort of manage.
Nice, perfect. So let me add your slides. It's amazing. I like the choice of colors. They have a great impact. So yes, Brian, good luck with your talk. Of course, feel free to ask anything in the comments, and see you in about 20 minutes. Okay, perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Bye.
Yeah. Cool. So welcome everybody. My name is Brian Douglas. I go by BDougieYo, BDougie on GitHub. And I'm here to talk about open source hospitality. And Francesco had a question about what that means. And I think this is a good segue into what Tracy was just talking about, getting started, getting involved in open source. This is going to be more of like, how do you become a better hospitable open source contributor as well as maintainer in the space? So like it's one step to find issues, find contributions, but it's the other thing of how can you just be a better community member? And I think there's so much opportunity, especially for new beginners in open source, to just be hospitable. So let me just jump into my slides. And this is actually very timely. Yesterday, my son stayed at home, and he did my wife. So he stayed at home from school. My wife actually gave him extra work to look at this book called Black Inventors. And it's mostly a lot of tech folks and a lot of like inventions that have impacted our life since years ago. And my son's really excited about it. He likes to read through stuff like that and like learn about, be inspired. And one thing I want to mention about sort of Black inventors is the concept of HBCUs. And I'll speak on this really briefly. Historically, Black colleges and universities, the United States has a whole history on Black Americans. We don't have to get into that today, but there was a creation of HBCUs by this guy, Booker T. Washington. Now, he's done a ton of stuff, but his biggest contribution is HBCUs. And what these are, in particular, they were trade schools. So if you think like a boot camp, these were places for folks to learn how to build a trade. Most of it was around hospitality. So a lot of folks learned how to do hotel work or do maid service and work at folks like richer people's homes. But this was like the groundwork of people just getting involved in society and sort of integrating as well. And I would say like in open source or in boot camps, it's not exactly the same, but I would say like these trade schools, they're not too far similar. Like where you go to an actual boot camp, learn how to code, learn the sort of the basics, and like you go become a front end dev, or you become an SRE, or you become a back end dev. Like that's the structure. That's sort of what I'm laying out today. And what I wanted to mention too as well is open source and an impact for your job. Like if you don't have a job, you're trying to get a job, open source can be extremely impactful. At this point, what Twitter is about to be open sourced, like so many different projects and companies are leveraging open source for not even just consumption to like leverage and build your own code base and your own frameworks and libraries, but also for hiring. Like the best place you could find really talented engineers is in their open source work. Now, I realize the playing field's not leveled because open source does require you to have free time. But what I do, and what I've done for the past 8 years, is I only do open source at work. And I'm happy to get into that more details and uncover that in slides. But I basically just find place for me to do open source at work. And I tend to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And I would guarantee that you probably could do the same thing for your roles. But feel free to talk to me later. So work at this company, it's a small company called GitHub. It's a little incubator inside of Microsoft. And we focus on engaging open source users. Like we build a lot of tools for collaboration. And it doesn't get any smaller than this. Like open source has such a big impact. Collaboration and tooling is something that we had to really double down as we started going to remote work everywhere. Now, GitHub's been a remote company since just about the beginning, and we've continued to strive and continue to do remote work as well. So if you are interested, we do hire in about 15 countries around the world. We'd love to make it more. So the best way to do that is by you applying and convincing us to open up in that region as well. Cool. So that's me. I'm a developer advocate at GitHub. And I joke that I'm the Beyonce of GitHub. And like, I say this because just today, this morning, I had two things people DM me on Twitter about GitHub. Like a cool idea, a cool feature, or they have an open source project they want to be promoted. Like I know people, I'm happy to tweet out stuff and get your stuff out in the open. Obviously, I want to make sure that it's something worth sharing about, but like I'm happy to see projects, give you ideas, give you feedback as well. All right, so I have a whole history of how I got into programming. I guess the Cliff Notes is I graduated the finance degree at a college, couldn't get a job in 2008 because of housing crisis, and finance was just not really the place to do it. So I ended up going to tech sales, eventually learned how to code online through Googling and open source, and I eventually joined a boot camp. Ironically, Brandon, who was mentioned, the founder, maintainer of Blitz.js and Flight Control, he actually went to the same boot camp as me. So I just wanted to point out just really quickly that the fact that Brandon is now open source maintainer for a very large project of Blitz.js and also startup founder, as a bootcamp grad, it's possible, and anybody can basically do it. You just gotta you gotta join community, you gotta network, but you also gotta put yourself out there. Someone like Sarah Drasner and Kenzie Dodds, also both mentioned in Tracy's talk, and both impactful to my journey. I've met with both of them just randomly at different events, and they've been super impactful. So if you want to learn the earliest of my career, I have a blog that's still up, and that's the URL. I also want to mention that I will tweet out these slides. So if there's a link, like I've got a lot of slides, so if there's a link you're looking for, definitely find me on Twitter. I'll tweet those out. Also, let's do something real quick. If you're watching this on YouTube and you share this on the Twitter, make sure the YouTube link is actually embedded in your tweet, and share like a good quote or a link and mention me. I'll give 3 people a $25 coupon to the GitHub shop. So if you want to get a cool sweater like this, or a t-shirt or hat, tweet out this event. Be sure to mention me and also add the link to the event as well. So that way folks who are learning cool things right now could also learn during my talk, but also the next talk that's coming up as well. Cool. So this is actually an email that I sent over to an open source maintainer years ago. Back in actually 2015. That's the date, literally on the email. And I had a problem where I wanted to build a little project, and I didn't know how to use JavaScript on the server at the time. Node.js was a couple of years in the sort of industry. It's been around for a bit, but I didn't know how to use it because my only experience in JavaScript was jQuery at the time, and I needed to build like this Node server thing. So I found a project by Googling that was on GitHub and was like available for me to leverage. And for whatever reason, I couldn't get it to work. So what I did is I went to the GitHub profile, found their email, because sometimes if you want to expose your email to folks to email you, you can it's just an opt-in thing in your profile. I emailed the maintainer and said, "Hey, maintainer, I don't know how to use this thing. Can you help me?" And to my surprise, they responded really quickly. And mind you, this was like Saturday night, like super late at night. It responded to me really quickly and was like, "Yeah, this, and this." And he actually unblocked me on how to build this project. So by the time I got to Monday, I had a fully functional project. And the project itself it's trivial. It was not really that worth mentioning. But what really blew me away is the fact that this maintainer went out of his way while he was traveling in Thailand. So he was a digital nomad. And he basically just unblocked me and then was like, "Hey, by the way, sorry for the delay. I was actually at a K-pop concert right now." And then sent me the picture, which I thought was like really, really impactful to me at that moment, to share a bit of your story, but also unblock me on something that was probably extremely trivial for you to even look at. So what I'm getting at is like, there was a lot of questions around in Tracy's talk around like how to get involved, how do you find things if there's stuff to work on. The best thing you can do is actually go talk to people. Like the best contribution is actually a comment in the Discord channel. And a lot of people, they don't think of that as first. Like first you look at the issue, you think, "Oh, I got to claim this because this is mine." But I'm sitting on a project right now with 66 contributors and almost 600 stars. I've got so many bugs in this project that I'm working on that all I need is somebody to use it, open up the issue, and that's your good first issue. And so I just want to mention that because like a lot of times we get in our heads about trying to find contributions on random sites like goodfirstissue.dev or Code Triage or on Twitter. But the best good fish issue is like the one you found. All right. So I spent a lot of time talking to GitHub Actions. A lot of my hospitality examples will be built on top of GitHub Actions. But if you aren't familiar, there's a lot of information out there about GitHub Actions that I've built myself. I have a dev.to series called 28 tips, 20 tips of GitHub Actions I did last year during the month of February, 28 days of February. So I did it then. And yeah, so if you want to like go from beginning to competent, like just go through that series and you'll have a good idea what actions are used for. I'd also mention I have a YouTube channel as well that you're more than welcome to watch my older videos on GitHub Actions. A lot of those videos are also, they link to the written form as well. So keep that in mind. But I wanted to transition into the hospitality piece. And if you watch any of my talks, you probably have seen me mention this as well. When I make the correlation to basketball in the NBA, shout out to the playoffs right now. Playoffs are happening, and this concept of in basketball. So if you're not familiar with basketball, it's kind of like soccer but with your hands, or football with your hands. And what I'm getting at is like there's a concept where 5 people on the court, and there could be that one person who just takes the ball and does a full court layup, which means they did not pass the ball to anybody. Like there's opportunity for them to share and participate or pass the ball to other folks. And I think as an engineer, you're always looking for opportunities to also like alley-oop or have an assist. Now, I wanted to point this out because, or I point that concept out because when you talk about the idea of basketball, there's a new notion of statistics in the last like 10 years when it comes to basketball. And what they found is that 31%, this area 31% of the shots from that point on the court, which is, so if you look at this like bent and then that circle with the straight line, that's the hoop. But that line right there, it's 31% of shots go in. And there's a lot of statistics on why this goes in, but it's mainly because the distance from the rim. Most players are right-handed as well. So that's where most plays get automated to. So like when you watch basketball, most plays are being automated where everybody on the 5 people on the court, they know exactly where to go. And this it'll make sense in a second, but workflow automation is very important in code, but it's also very important in sports. So if you understand the concept of sports, and I know Francesco as a former volleyball coach, like you understand the concept of plays and automation. So like if you're athlete, like you always know what to do next because you've trained and you trained and you trained and you trained. And I think when it comes to writing code, it's very similar. It's like not too far off because like a lot of times you see a test or you see a bug, you've seen this before, and you can bring that expertise into an open source project. So that's what I'm getting at. So I built this project called Open Sauce, and we're really on this concept of Gucci Mane, who's actually going to be it's going to be a musical guest at Render Late ATL, which I'm super excited about. I can't wait to go speak over there and mention Gucci Mane. But there was this interview back in the same time when I was trying to get a job in 2008. Gucci Mane has an interview about how do you know if you're like a special rapper, like how do you know if you got the sauce? And his response is, if you don't got sauce, then you lost, because you have to know what the sauce is. And I think when you have that sauce, that secret sauce of like, oh, I've seen this before, oh, I know how to do this, or I know how to accomplish this in open source, that's where you could really sort of unlock so much levels of engineering. And I think it really comes down to, it's like not you knowing how to invert a binary tree. It's more of like you seeing a problem that can be solved with like a library, or it can be solved with this language or this framework. Like you've seen this, you've had enough at bats, you've had enough shots at the hoop to be able to know what to do next. So Open Sauce, it's an open source project. This is the actual the flagship repo. And at the moment, we're going through lots of changes right now, and it's going to be a dashboard to find open source contributions, but also find if open source projects are taking contributions. So in the next month or so, we're going to have a lot of updates. I encourage you to really just follow the repo, to start or join the Discord. Like you don't have to actually watch it, but if you want to, there you go. But we also have docs, and like our docs are really set up in a way for if you want to get involved in open source in general, like we set you up for success. And I would say that the majority of my contributors have usually either rolled off to become a maintainer somewhere else, or they've taken jobs at really interesting companies, because what I like to do is like to mentor open source contributors. And what I don't do is I don't just basically like set up a meeting with you every week and we do like a call or anything like that. But it's more of like you show up, you ask questions, you want a contribution, I'll make you a contribution. Like I told you, this project has so many bugs, and I can open up another issue for that bug, and you can go ahead and squash it if you would like. But it just comes down to like, did you show up? And I think the hardest part about open source is the showing up, because like it does take time. It does take a lot of, yes, exactly. It's Docusaurus. It does take a lot of time. It does take a lot of effort. So like the fact that you can show up, it means the world to maintainers. I was actually talking to a maintainer of a very large project that we all use, and he was saying that he was actually helping me to doing my first contribution to that project. And I was thanking him and like, hey, thanks for taking the time. He's like, I would love to do this with more people, but usually what happens is like somebody does their first contribution and then they disappear. Like they just go in, they're like, almost like if they're in the wind. It's like you get hit that merge button, and then they just like, they walk away and they dissipate into the horizon. And if you could be that person to make your first contribution, but make a second contribution, it would mean the world to so many different communities in open source. Like if you could be that person just to like test releases, to open issues, just to be helpful, answer questions and discussions, it would mean the world to so many other maintainers. But for whatever reason in open source, we have this culture where it's all about just getting the one and done and moving on. And I think if there was consistency, like you would get so much free mentorship. Eddie's like this on fire in the chat right now. Eddie's like someone who gives tons of free mentorship. And you just got to show up and you just ask questions and be helpful. And then once you've been helped, help somebody else, because that's what grows community. All right. So what I'm getting at is the docs. I didn't mean to like go on a soapbox, but I've got this automation and I use GitHub Actions to automate this. So our doc site is like really approachable to make contribution. And what I usually do, if someone makes a big change to the code base, like we had dark mode, someone added dark mode to the project, it was suggested not by me, it was suggested by a contributor. And I was like, oh, cool. If you want to do it, do it. So they added dark mode to the project. It was not the easiest thing. It was kind of complicated to get to refactor a bunch of stuff. And what I asked it to do is write a contribution on how this works. So all of our major features like dark mode, there's actually a documentation on how it works. Because if someone wants to contribute next, then now they know exactly what to do next. So we have this automation to deploy our docs using GitHub Actions. And it's a whole pipeline. But what I'm getting at is like we use this deployment structure for consistency reasons. So any project in open source has the same CI. Any project in open source has the same test suite. So that way anybody can basically walk in and know what's going on. Another thing that we do participate in Hacktoberfest, and we use project tables. So if you're an open source maintainer, if you have a project, and also if you have like a small project, I have so many small projects that get contributions. And if you just set it up for people to walk in, like at the README, walk in with like maybe an issue board, like in a project table, it means the world for new contributors. So during Hacktoberfest, we put all our Hacktoberfest issues into a project table for anybody to grab for up for grabs. This GFI, that means good first issue. So like we have a list of good first issues. They get automatically added to the table. So if anybody comes into Discord, it's like, hey, I want a good first issue. We have so many places where stuff like this just shows up. We also have an entire channel that's called Good First Issues. And every time something is labeled by either our project or somebody who uses the catch-up bot, we have a bot basically to install into your repos to promote good first issues. What do I get? I'm getting at is we have places to find good first issues. I did want to point out this one good first issue that showed up. And again, this is a contribution that really wasn't, it was me sort of just throwing it out there as an idea and someone picking it up. So, and it's the concept of linked issues. So MT Foley, who just took a full-time job as an engineer. So he scaled back his contributions, but he's enjoying full-time engineering at a great company. There's a concept of linked issues. So I actually wrote out this idea of every time you open up a pull request in open source, we actually require you have a linked issue. But the problem is we could not enforce that. So we built out the structure through GitHub Actions to enforce linked issues. And the reason for this is like, we wanted to like nudge people into the right direction whenever they made a contribution. We didn't want to just close the PR. Like Francesco mentioned, like 70% end up getting closed. And we wanted to like not close PRs, but we wanted to nudge people to like just fill out the description. Every PR has a template in my projects, and we ask for specific information on what you've done. And it makes it so much helpful because all these PRs, they go into our release notes, and all those release notes go into our docs, and all those docs get read by every single other person in the project or anybody who contributes. So the goal is like set up the project for success by adding stuff. And when I talk about hospitality in the concept of like hotels, like you walk into a hotel and the room, and you know exactly where the towels are. Like, you know where the soaps are, you know where the shampoo is, you know how to like get ice. Like that's a given for most westernized hotels. Actually, even all across the world, like it's not even a Western thing. Hotels is the model. So if you have an open source project and you walk into the open source project, like where would I go to find good first issues? There are obvious places to put that, but not everybody's doing that. Oh, so I did want to point out that on the side right bar, you can link an issue. So our requirement is that you actually use the sort of shorthand. This PR closes number issue. And that's basically what we enforce. And it's made it so much easier for new contributors because by the time I get to the PR, there's already a bot that's basically telling them how to contribute. One thing we also do is we use issue forms. This has been a godsend, really, because when people open up bugs, like if someone uses Brave, and I say Brave because Brave tends to always have, because of privacy, tends to always have like the weirdest stuff exposed. Like if you're using stuff in cookies or you're using some insecure tokens or exposing those, like Brave will find that for you. But they won't expose, they'll just fail. It'll just fail completely because like Chrome is a little more, actually Chrome's kind of got locked down a bit in the last year and a half, but I would just say like just telling me what browser you're using or what version you're using is super helpful. So what we use is issue forms in GitHub. It's just a template structure for issues. Definitely check out the docs, but all of our issues require issue forms and required inputs as well. Because if you're going to open up issue and say this doesn't work, you're not helping anybody. You're basically just saying, hey, this doesn't work, and you're giving more load, like a more weight for the open source maintainer to like figure out what you're saying. So like say what you're going to say, but I try to provide some context, and my issue forms help to sort of pull that context out of you. GitHub discussions is another thing that I don't think it's used enough, to be honest. Like, it's been around for a couple of years now. And this is the discussion for us to discuss that PR linter that we were just talking about. MT Foley actually started a conversation in a discussion. We went back and forth. We scoped out the entire feature, but it wasn't like an issue. It wasn't something that was actionable. It was just like a conversation amongst friends about a project and its future. And it was super helpful to have this discussion linked into things like the docs for folks to contribute in the future and understand how this works. So in discussions, you can mark things as answers. You can also do polls as well. And you also get like kudos and brownie points for non-code contributions by just answering questions and discussions. It's a great place to get started. The one thing I want to point out is all this context that we talked through for this Good First issue that MT Foley picked up in the discussion. He went and built his own GitHub action. Now, the beauty of this is that he built a GitHub action that he can basically apply this Band-Aid to any project. So he's now an expert on how to operate PR compliance or to enhance Git First issues by requiring linked issues on PRs. And I think it's a great setup to learn how to use GitHub Actions to help to sort of like be that expert in the space that you don't even realize you're in. So whether it's like I think with Playwright you could do automated testing, like you can set up you can set up a lot through automation, and then you could actually package that into a library and become an open source maintainer through Actions. So happy to share more on that. I don't have enough time to go into all this, but I will say that reusable action workflows is also another godsend. I had mentioned we use the same action workflow across all repos. Reusable action workflows makes it super easy for us to do this. And just recently, PyTorch, yesterday, actually had a podcast of how they switched from Circle CI to GitHub Actions because reusable action workflows. So if you don't know about any of this, like definitely check it out. There's a podcast that you can definitely check out as well. Some other automation we do is that we make sure that every single PR that gets open has automation codes. So it's conventional commits. If you have feat or fix or bug or docs, it has to be prepended to all titles for PRs because we use our titles for all automating of our docs and releases. So it's all in our contributing MD. You definitely just go there, learn about it. But a ton of other projects use the same conventional commit. So if you go contribute to Node.js or you contribute to React, like they're all using this sort of framework for commit. So if you learn the basics of this, you can go contribute anywhere and not feel like you're not sure what you're doing. The other thing is that PR compliance, it actually tells you exactly when things are failing. So if you did something wrong, it's okay. Just fix it, let the actions run again, and then it'll sort of let you know you've done a good job. Cool. So this is an example of our previous workflow. This is an example of what reusable workflows look like. We're actually be able to point directly to another repo and have those workflows run. Again, this is all context. I have a lot of blog posts on the GitHub blog actually about this. So definitely feel free to check it out. So I don't have a link to that in particular. And then like the last thing I wanted to talk about is the generate release notes. Now, I say all this because in order to get to this point where we could automate release notes, we had to do all the other steps before. We had to basically figure out a framework of how to do contributions in open source and then make sure that anybody comes through has the same sort of experience. So like if you want to contribute, you're doing the same way I'm doing it. I'm opening up I'm forking the project. I'm opening up a PR. I make sure I link my issue. I make sure I write in descriptions. The one thing that blows my mind, like if you make a visual change, like you make a React component change, CSS, add a screenshot. It's going to speed up the process for review. And I think a lot of folks a lot of folks consider contributing, but then they realize, oh man, I can't I can't sit around and wait for this thing to get merged, or like this thing will never be merged. If you provide more information, like if you oversubscribe and provide tons of information, it makes it so much easier for the maintainer to review that thing. Because if I'm on my phone and I get this click a link, look at what you changed, and then merge it from my phone, I'll do that. But if I go to my phone and it says, oh, clone the repo, do this, this, and this, and then go look at the visual changes, I won't do that till I get home. So if you want to get your PR merged, you have to basically set up yourself for success. Cool. And then the one thing I did want to point out is that all release notes, you can actually automate those releases by just clicking a button. If you haven't cut a release, just create a tag, cut a release. Tons of documentation on this. I'm happy to do more content. Actually, probably should do content around that, because that's a concept that maybe doesn't get taught to a lot of beginners. But I'll end with the last couple slides. Is that I highly recommend you can contribute while at work. Now, there's some like nuance, like maybe you have to use your personal computer or your personal time or whatever. But like on your lunch break, best thing I used to do is actually do open source contributions on Fridays, but also like every day at lunch. Like if I had to wait for like reviews or testing the pass, I would just drop into an open source project and start contributing. And the way I would contribute is like answer questions, provide like conversation to like the issues, like jump into Discord and sit in Slack and like just be a participant in open source. And that's how I got to where I'm at today, not in particular to GitHub, but contribute open source. So my recommendation is like just participate, like join community, go to talks like this or events like this every month. And you'll eventually find community, and then you'll be able to like slowly start integrating yourself into the process. I'd also mention if you are an open source maintainer, if you're involved in open source, there's a program at GitHub where we take students and we teach them how to do the basics of open source during the course of like a year. And at the end of the year, we actually take them on as interns at GitHub. So we have 25 interns who are joining us through this all-in program who specifically learn open source, and now they're going to learn how to code at GitHub. So you're more than welcome to join this community, get involved. If you're either a maintainer or you work at a company, would definitely love your input if you work at a company to take on interns for next summer. And so check it out. Also, this is me on GitHub. My GitHub profile is actually powered by GitHub Actions. I've done some posts on this as well, so definitely check it out. And then also mentioned that the open source YouTube channel, we're gonna be revamping this a bit. So if you want to boost this up to 90 subscribers, that'd be awesome. Technically, that's an old screenshot, like 200 at this point. But yeah, definitely check us out. We also have some cool features that are coming out pretty soon, the next like 3 to 4 weeks. So I'm looking forward to sharing those. And then just a reminder, if you don't got sauce, then you lost.
Perfect, Brian. I love that. Sorry, but I was checking to the open source, the YouTube links. By the way, you have more than 200 subscribers now. So
Yeah.
I'm happy that that's outdated. And we have some questions, but before that, just let me tell you that I loved the sport analogy. That it's really the way to just catch my attention. I love that. And I think we have this question before I forget. Is it possible to copy? You were talking about templates. If you can use this on another project, do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so we do have so in open source, like everything's open source. So you're more than welcome to copy our PR templates. To be quite honest, our PR template came from the forum team, so dev.to. We because their stuff's open source, we actually started from their PR template, and then we just sort of massaged it to be what we wanted. But the issue templates as well, it's all open source. So if you go to any if you go to the .github folder in the project, we actually have a .github repo, to be quite honest. And the .github is like it's a secret feature for all of GitHub. So like templates, actions, you could actually throw them all in the .github repo or inside of a .github folder, and then you could repeat that in all projects. So you start a brand new repo, it already has issue templates if you have a .github.
Nice. And yes, so I don't know if we have any other questions, just a couple of minutes. And no, my question is that do you know why we have so few people that have this like ever made a contribution to open source? Because for me, it's shocking that we have like almost 70% people saying no. And I'm not talking about creating a whole project, but this can also be just like a typo fix. So maybe why do you think that people are so blocked? Maybe because they are new developers, or maybe they
Yeah.
don't know about open source?
I think it's part of the benefit of also anybody can onboard themselves in the engineering or in tech or go to a boot camp. Like the bar is actually not that high, but once you realize like the secret sauce of like literally the secret sauce of how to do open source, like then everything's been exposed and like actually exactly how to do it. Like I've talked to so many maintainers, so many contributors who like quote unquote made it or are stars or influencers in the ecosystem. And it really comes down to like they end up being in the right place at the right time. And being in the right place at the right time is like just being involved. And like that's why I mentioned doing open source at work. So like you have a library, you find a bug, and you're like, oh, this thing sucks. I'm gonna go use something else. And like that mindset of I'm just gonna use something else, not that I can go back and fix it, is where most people like they have to disconnect. The other thing I'd mention too as well, like the best contributions you could also make is React 18 just came out. And before React 18 came out, like a year prior, Dan and the team basically said, hey, we have a working group. It's in discussions. We're going to talk about React 18. And all we need to do is have companies and engineers use React 18 at work or in their projects. Well, imagine how many people actually did that. It's not a ton. For how many people use React, it's like a very small percentage, like less than 0.5% probably. And I said Vue.js, same thing. Like they did the very similar thing with Vue 3. Very few people use the latest and greatest or even test it and provide feedback. And if you could be that person just to provide feedback and test it, like you could have free mentorship because that team will then turn around and be like, hey, you're helpful. Would you like to help on something else? And I think that's the best way to get your onboarding experience in open source rather than grab an issue, write code, never go back ever again.
Nice. So last question. So we give enough time to Javier because usually the last person has less time. So I want to give him the right time. So the question is how can we join the We Are All In community? Can you give us a link? So if you provide me the link in the private chat, I'll share this in the community chat.
Yeah.
But, it can also be now or after that. We have Nick Taylor is helping a lot of people here. Of course, learning Git. And say reach out to people. So yes, it's so I always say that it's always about people, not just about code. Let me put this here. Perfect. I enjoyed this a lot. That MBA part was unexpected, so it was great. Also, you made something music related, so I also loved that. And yes, so I like the idea that code is not just about we need to break that stereotype of like I don't know the hacker with the black hoodie. Okay, we have black hoodies, but the black hoodie we just in a dark room and with the green screen. And before we close it, Brian, would you like to say this again? What you said at the beginning, like that on Twitter you can share something. So I can also participate.
Yeah. So I had mentioned that if you tweet out with the link of the YouTube stream, and then mention me, I'll throw you first 3 people to do it. I'll throw you a coupon to the shop for GitHub. So $25 at shop.github.com, and you can get a cool sweater just like what I'm wearing.
Nice. So I highly recommend you to do this. Just don't leave the live stream. Just watch the last one. You have time, and then you can do this. Of course, I also added the Twitter handle for all the speakers in the description. So thank you for also pointing out that. We are done, Brian. So looking forward for more collaborations. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. All right, see ya.
Bye. Okay, let me invite the last guest. So Javier, you are the last guest. We have enough time, so you have 25 minutes. And yes, so I'll tell you what I know about Javier. I've seen that he has been in the industry for 20 plus the 25 years. So since the beginning, since you were let's say more fresh, we could say, but you look great. Also, I've noticed that you was born in Mexico, right? And you made the Mexico University Computer Systems, right? And something that maybe, so a lot of people, maybe they know you because of your contribution to open source, but I found something interesting. It was that you played baseball, right? Did I get right? You're muted, Javier.
Yes. Once upon a time, I was an athlete. Yes, I did play baseball growing up all the way to college. And yes, born and raised in Mexico City, now living in Boston, the Boston area, for the last 25 years. So it's been a long journey. Yes, I don't look that old.
Nice, nice. So I don't want to steal too much time, so you have all the time that you need. So what's your talk about? So what's happening in open source? So how can you make like a small trailer, and then I'll let you know.
Yeah. So look, after having these two great sessions about how to contribute to open source and get you motivated to start contributing to open source, this is a little bit different. This is about telling you what's going on in the industry, what's going on with some of the most successful open source projects, with organizations using open source software. There are three main topics. One is obviously about the usage, the popularity, adoption of open source projects, contributions, of course. The second one is about the whole life cycles, right? Long-term support, end of life. That's happening in the industry, and it takes a major effect on organizations that are building and maintaining mission critical applications with open source, right? Everything is open source now.
Nice.
And then the third piece, of course, it's security, right? Security in open source. So I'll cover a little bit about open source security. I think it's very important topic today, and that's why the title, what's happening in open source.
Perfect. So good luck, Javier. Bye. See you later. Bye.
Thank you, Francesco. Pleasure to be here. And again, thank you for inviting me. Obviously, I'd love to talk about open source. And I just quickly mentioned that, I've been in open source for a long time. My background started as a kind of sales engineer, product management. And then over the last, about a couple of years, really been focusing on advocacy and evangelism. So work with a lot of organizations, companies. There's a lot of activity around open source, internal projects, doing inner source, some moving into open source program offices. So I'd love to talk about the technologies. I work for Perforce, specifically. They have many brands inside Perforce. Specifically, for the most part, I work with a brand called OpenLogic, which we offer technical support for open source packages. And that's about as much as I'm going to say about kind of from the commercial point of view. But you can see my contact details there on the screen. Happy to engage on a conversation. And so here, yes, I have a few stats for you. This is where we are in terms of libraries, in terms of packages, open source out there, right? This you can go to you see the source there on this screen, modulecount.com, and see very much an up-to-date. Well, I actually updated this really recently, just last week. Look at the numbers, right? More than 1.9 million Node.js JavaScript packages, right? And then look at the number just below that, more than 1,000 new packages per day. Isn't that amazing? Look how many on Maven for Java, PyPy, Bucketlist, Nugget. Nugget has been grown a lot. I mean, I have this version of this slide. I've been kind of maintaining this slide for a couple of years now, and Python, and so PyPy and Nugget has been probably the ones that have grown the most, and then probably on this 6, probably the one that at a much slower pace, it's been Ruby gems, Ruby packages. So we are growing everything. It's open source, and with sessions like the ones that we just had, hopefully we can invite more people to go and contribute in a small piece, in small contributions, or going and open sourcing your own code, your own projects, doing and growing your own projects. Now, the second piece here is those more popular, successful projects, and I don't expect you to read this slide. But now we have thousands, right? We're talking about thousands. One thing is just the libraries, which I was just showing you first, and then the whole kind of more popular projects that are big projects there. And for that, we have so many. We have thousands, right? And the best way, or pretty much the best way to go and be successful on this when a project takes off and you have more and more contributors, is to make it part of some of the foundations out there, open source foundations, right? The Linux Foundation is kind of an umbrella foundation with many more foundations, right? The Continuous Delivery Foundation, AI and Data Foundation, Node or the JavaScript, and I can go on and on. Mainframe Foundation, Open Mainframe Foundation. There are so many more, right? But look at the number of projects, right? These are, I mean, some of them are an incubator, some of them what is called already kind of graduated projects, but most of these are running applications all over the world, successful applications, in some cases mission critical applications, right? So that's what is happening today, and we see more and more large organizations like the likes of GitHub and Microsoft and Google and IBM and Red Hat and many others. By the way, I forgot to mention that my background, I did work at Red Hat before the IBM acquisition, and then I worked for IBM after the Red Hat acquisition. And all these organizations have full-time developers working upstream, right? Working on open source, and they are invested on these successful projects, right? How many contributors to Kubernetes today? Hundreds. How many contributors to some of the most successful projects out there? Istio, or I mean, you can go on and on and on the names, and that's what is happening today, right? The open source is a little bit different. Open source is a little bit different today because we have all these organizations also contributing upstream. More about that in just a second, but we at the end of last year, starting in January, I worked on a major survey, work with OSI, with the Open Source Initiative, for a major survey about what's going on open source in organizations. And this presentation is not about the results. I have a couple of charts for you to show here. Have another talk about that. If you go to that QR code, you can download the 77-page report if you want to take a look at all the details. But I wanted to highlight a couple of things. One is when we ask if you have increased the use of open source in your organization over the last year, right? I mean, we're in the middle of still on the pandemic. And basically 77% say yes, we increase the use of open source, which is great, right? Again, we keep inviting everyone to continue to contribute and do more open source, but the stats are trending really, really well, right? And you can look at like that number. The 1.6% said we are actually reduced the use of open source software, which is nothing, right? And turns out to be related with some end-of-life projects, which I'm going to mention in just a second. Then the next piece is, you can just list on the list there. Open source, obviously, it's about all the different technologies, everything related. We're talking about open source software here, so all kind of the different categories of software. So there was this still, a lot of people, especially organizations, thinking that open source is just about open program languages or maybe the different Linux distributions. It's not. It's about absolutely everything, right? The percentages here mean nothing because we ask people to go on, and it's a multiple option selection there. But the point is, it's about absolutely every technology, every piece of technology. That's where we're involved on open source. And just going back quickly to what I was mentioning on basically the larger organizations very involved with open source. Then we also have a lot of startups really making a lot of money, being very, very successful with an open source model, or starting with open source. And typically these two, what you see here on the screen, right? Typically these two models is what we've seen today as the successful open core, which is basically adding features on top of an open source project. Of course, the company, the startup or large organization contribute upstream, right? They maintain as much as possible the project or their key contributors, because they have a business on top of that, right? So they can add and sell features on top of that. And then, of course, the hosting, right? The software as a service, which has been really, really successful, especially for data technologies, particularly successful there. Now, obviously, we still have the cases like Red Hat, where they have obviously had a very, very successful business where just saying we provide the support. It's a subscription base. We make sure that we test what we delivered. We're going to continue to contribute open source, but we guarantee you that we support you. Well, there are many more trying to do that or doing those type of models, or combining what I just mentioned: open core, SaaS, subscription support services, right? So one example, and here the idea is not to promote any company, but one example is for Postgres or PostgreSQL. You can just see there, I'm listing 3 companies that are actually offering Postgres, right? And there are more actually, right? So a successful open source project creates more business. If you're listening and you have idea, if you are an expert on a specific project, hey, why not? Right? You can start your own business consulting, providing support, or adding features on top of that open source. Great, right? And obviously at the same time, the spirit of open source, you contribute upstream, make sure that you don't create you don't fork and you create your own proprietary version, right? Keep contributing back, keep it open source. The company that I work for, we offers technical support only, not open core, technical support only for projects like Postgres and others. Here are a couple of more examples, just to give you a sense of what's going on, right? And there are many more there, right? So you see on the left the open source project, and then with the arrows, different companies that are actually being very successful, either doing SaaS or open core or both, right? And offering support services for that. All of these companies, by the way, they are contributing back, right? They're very much into open source. They have full-time developers. For the most part, actually, no, all of them have full-time developers working upstream. I'm sure if you are one of those, I'm sure you're going to recommend to others to, this is a model, right? And Brian was mentioning, well, contribute during working hours, during your lunch break. Even nicer if you get paid to work full-time on open source, which is great, right? So that's happening today, open source. Something happened here with my slide. I guess it's just the way to show you, but what you will see on those circles, for some reason they disappear here. It's the different versions for these 4 examples of open source projects. The point that I wanted to make here on this slide is every project has its own rules, right? Its own life cycles. And as a community, you can change those life cycles anytime, right? So that's something to pay attention, right? When we have Linux kernel, it's been around for 30 years, right? Going to 31 years now. It's only on version 5. Node.js, much more modern or newer, and it's on version 17, whereas Spark, about the same age, only on version 3, and Kubernetes, only around for the last 7 years, still on version 1.x, right? So that's another big piece that you have to pay attention. And I keep telling when I go and speak to organizations is you have to pay attention to this, because you have your critical business applications using these 4 or more of these key open source projects. Yeah, something happened here with the display, but those circles are supposed to have information and the dates. And I have a couple of examples really quick on the life cycles and why is this important. AngularJS is like version 1 of Angular, right? And some of you might remember with version 2, it took about 5-6 years with AngularJS, but version 2 of Angular, what they call Angular as opposed to AngularJS, it was a rewrite, right? It was written on TypeScript, which meant if you were using AngularJS, it's not really compatible. You have to rewrite your app, right? And for that reason, there was a long-term support by the community, very much driven by Google, but the open source community, to continue a long-term support, meaning patches, updates, especially for high severity critical vulnerabilities and major bugs. And they kept maintaining that, and they did that for 11 years. For 11 years, right? At the end of last year, December 31st, 2021, that was finally end of life, right? So guess what? There's still thousands of applications out there, web applications out there, still on AngularJS. And now they are on an end of life project that is no longer going to receive updates, patches, fixes to vulnerabilities, right? So very important to keep an eye on the life cycles of all these open source projects, especially some of the most popular ones. The other one, and again, apologies for the display, I should have checked this before. Same things happened with CentOS. CentOS, a little bit different story, right? Some of you know this. CentOS became really the open source version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right? Basically a copy of RHEL, with just removing the branding and maybe a little bit a few differences in packages. And it became really successful because people will say, well, it's free, it's open source, and by the way, Red Hat already fully tested this, so we'll use that, right? And Ubuntu, CentOS were the most popular open source, free open source Linux distributions. Well, an experience here, when open source communities or open source projects are driven by one vendor, in this case, the CentOS project by Red Hat, well, that single vendor can make decisions which are the same as the community, right? And that can influence and affect other people, right? So here the announcement was, we're going to stop working with CentOS. We're moving to CentOS Stream, which it's going to be more of a rolling release, before we release Red Hat Enterprise Linux, as opposed to after, right? So, good for them. I think it's good to work on an open rolling releases with CentOS Stream. But what affected here is that, well, now CentOS version 8, its end of life was actually end of life at the end of, end of year last year, December 31st, 2021, which means, again, any application, any deployment with CentOS is no longer going to receive patches, fixes. There's going to be any more updates or releases, right? And obviously there are risks of working with open source projects that are, or any software that it's end of life, that it's not going to receive any packages. So those are the things that are happening as well in the industry today, right? And again, the message is, keep an eye on those life cycles, right? Obviously, there are a lot of challenges with releases. I don't have to tell you. I mean, all of this, right? And really, the trend here is, we have so many more contributors. We have, successful projects. Well, we need to kind of go and release more often, right? We automate everything. We use, GitHub Actions, or we use other tooling, security, and other things, and we want to move faster, right? Therefore, maintaining older versions becomes a problem, and that's why the release life cycles and the long-term support from the community to those older versions become shorter and shorter, right? That's happening. That's the trend. Something to keep an eye on. One other thing that I want to mention here for the releases is, if you are doing open source, or if you want to start going into open source, keep an eye on these last two bullet points, right? Very important, not just to have the software running, but if you really want to expand it and very successful, you want to make sure that it also works on multiple platforms, right? Maybe x86 processors, but also ARM processors. Everything might just run without a difference, without a problem. In some cases, you might have to do your testing and make a few adjustments if you want to work on or make it run on multiple platforms. The same goes with Linux distributions. If you're using some of the packages that are unique to Ubuntu versus Debian, or versus CentOS, now CentOS Stream, or so many on any of the other Linux distributions, you want to make sure that you test that, you fix that you make your releases or your builds available for multiple Linux distributions. So that's another key for the success of the projects, and that's something that we see all along, right? So yes, absolutely, kind of the reduction of life cycles, it's happening. There's a lot more awareness about security, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. I know I ran out of time. Here, a quick reminder of some of the noteworthy end-of-life software. Some of them already happened, as I mentioned, with Angular, JS, and CentOS. Drupal is 7 is coming. We just had the one for Java, Oracle Java 8. And keep an eye on your versions of Python, because some of them, or many other versions, already went end of life. And of course, I think it's kind of obvious there, the gamble when you're working with end of life software, right? That is not going to receive a single update. Well, you can see that they could be discover vulnerabilities and exploits anytime, right? We just recently have a couple of major examples, right, with Log4j and Spring for Shell, and there are others. I mean, there are new vulnerabilities every day, right? So yeah, you have to have the patches. And the beauty of open source is that we see that the vulnerability is disclosed for the most part, when there's already a fix out there, but you have to keep up with the patches. Here's a quick example for you. I went and took a look at one of the most popular libraries, one of the most popular Java libraries there, and it's used by more than 22,000 other open source projects, right? You can see here the examples like Scala-Test or Springwave. How about Log4j, Apache Log4j, right? It uses the same library, Commons.io, Apache Commons.io, but in return, more than 7,000 other open source projects use Apache Log4j. This data is just from a couple of months old, so the numbers might be a little bit different today, but you get the point. There were, at least in February, another more than 7,000 projects that are have that dependency on Apache Log4j. Successful projects, very popular projects like JUnit for testing, or Spring Boot, or Camel, or JBoss, right? And so you see the impact here in terms of the security aspects, right? When there's a vulnerability found in one of those projects or one of those dependencies, it goes across through the chain, right? Because open source project uses other open source projects and uses other open source projects, right? So very, very important to keep an eye on the latest releases. I don't think I'm going to have time to go over the details here. This is just a map of the story with Log4j. The point here is really that, really a zero-day vulnerability, but got the fix really in matter of days. New release with other patches in basically over the weekend. And really the issue here is for everyone to go and find all those applications that we're using or are using Log4j and go and apply the patches, right? So the problem here is not the fix came along really, really quick. The issue is to keep up with that, and that's what is happening today in open source. Good news, this is from NVD, the National Vulnerability Database. There are more disclosures of vulnerability, right? Don't read this as, oh, there are more vulnerabilities. There always existed vulnerabilities. The problem is that people, developers, they have to disclose these vulnerabilities. Let everyone knows about this, through the National Vulnerability Database or some of the other repositories. Get a CV and making sure that you make it public. So the way, or the positive way to read this is, it's not that there are more vulnerabilities, there are more disclosed vulnerabilities, and at the same time, most of them, I believe, is something like 98%, already have a fix, right? So again, the point that I want to keep repeating is, you just have to keep up with updates and patches. And going back to the survey that I mentioned, it was a global survey, more than 2,600 respondents on the survey. Their number one, when we ask what is the open source support, number one support challenge for you, number one came keep up with updates and patches. And of course, number two, personal experience and proficiency, right? And that includes training, and that includes the fact that there are so many job openings for people with open source skills that it's good for us, right? It's good for us that we're in this space. There are a lot of jobs out there, but you just have to keep working, have to keep learning, because things change really quickly, right? Change really, really quickly. So just to end the session here, I think it's important to keep an eye on those release life cycles. There's a few lessons there in terms of some of the most recent end-of-life projects, as well as end-of-life releases, right? And security, very important. Keeping up with the security aspect on open source is a good news. Now, you have to scan your code. You might need to make sure you scan your open source libraries to make sure that you have the latest and greatest patches, or that you can identify vulnerabilities and address that. So I think I'll leave it here, Francesco, and I don't know if we still have a couple of minutes for questions.
Perfect, Javier. I don't know if we have any question, just drop them fast, because we are close to the end. Okay, we have like 5 minutes just to wrap it up. Thank you so much. I don't know what happened to you, some of your slides, but I think you handled this like a pro. So I think we have to learn from that. There is really when you see the experience of someone that you really just super calm. It was just explaining this. It was almost engaging. Thank you so much.
Has happened before, yeah. Has happened before. Something on the display happened there with the platform.
Yeah, I think we should learn from you. By the way, I'll make my first event as a public speaker in about 1 month. So wish me luck, because I will be the first public speaker in a month. So I'm trying to also get what speakers they what do they do. And yes, thank you so much. Just want to share something before. Just want to share this meme. I don't know if you know this one.
Yes.
Yes. And yes, so yes, Javier, thank you so much for your talk. It was very informative. I think you've touched different points. I really enjoyed this. And also, let me tell you that I made another poll. So I made a poll like, have you ever contributed to open source? We got like 60% of no out of 400 votes. So that's bad. But I asked like, okay, but if you said no, would you like to contribute to open source? We got like 90% of yes. So I think we need to work on this part now. So now I'm taking all the results of this poll. And yes, so let me add this again, maybe. So yeah, you can find Javier on LinkedIn and Twitter. You have your website. And yes, I'm trying to scroll if I find any question, but I think it was very informative, by the way.
Thank you. There were a few comments there, but yeah, no, look, I think the message here is, we are in a great space. Yes, we want more contributions, more open source software. It's going well, even though there's more publicity around security. It's actually a good thing, because there's more awareness on people addressing vulnerabilities, keeping up with these life cycles, which is a big thing. And yeah, we can talk another time about more specifics on open source security and some of these topics.
Perfect. So if you want to stay just the last 2 minutes just with me, just want to remind you that the next episode of the Monthly Dev, it will be on the 24th of May, because we moved, because I need to move to Poland to make this speech. So it will be not on the last Tuesday, but on the 24th of May. And it will be about how to stand out in interviews. That all these topics are also connected each other, of course, if you want to stand out as a developer, if you want to level up your career. I really enjoyed the topic today. And just let me remember super fast that all these events, apart me and also of the amazing speakers, are sponsored, we can say, organized by daily.dev, which is a tool to stay updated as a developer. It's a tool from developers to developers. And we have grown a lot in the last year. We have grown in our team. We are, I think, 12 or 13 now. We are hiring every single week now. We are announcing a lot of new people. So if you want to take a look, it's totally free. There is no premium version, so just check it out and let's see if this can help you as a developer. We are getting sources from many different blogs. And yes, that's it. So Javier, thank you so much again. I learned a lot, even from a future wannabe public speaker. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, perfect. So yes, we are about to wrap this event. Just 4 minutes more. I need to improve this. I need to make this end, but I really didn't want to cut someone. Thank you, of course, for contributing to this live stream. Of course, we want them to be interactive. We have seen a lot of introduction today. We're also close to 4,000 subscribers. So we're working a lot on this every single month. And yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Javier. We are done for today. So welcome. And of course, remember to contribute to open source and be part of this amazing world. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.